I mean, if there's Bob's Burgers fanfics, I'm sure that there's Scott Pilgrim's fanfic.
Meet Sara and Samantha.
Two cousins obsessed with exploring the vast pop culture landscape, one recommendation at a time.
In each episode, one clueless cousin shares real-time reactions as they navigate the twists and turns of a pop culture topic selected by the other.
From travel to movies,
Little Debbie's to trashy novels.
Get ready to eavesdrop on the candid reactions and dynamic conversations you can only have with family.
This is Foreign and Familiar.
Welcome to Foreign and Familiar. I am Samantha.
And I'm Sara.
Sara, it is amazing to see your face. I'm obsessed.
Amazing to see you as always.
Never gets old, Sara. You are the bright spot in any day that I get to see you.
Thanks. You're mine too.
You're
I was
so
looking
sweet.
forward to this all day. I was so excited.
So sweet. Cousin, husband, listen, we have this running thing for our family listeners that Sara and I are in the midst of a long con with cousin husband where cousin husband will go off on his work trip, and that one of these times Sara is going to not even leave a note, and her and I are going to run away together and just live happily ever after. Is that correct, Sara? Would you agree?
It's true. This is like years
of planning.
Yeah, exactly.
It's our Thelma and Louise moment. Again, there's nothing, it's not like a sexual thing. It's just like a life partner thing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Cousin husband is in on it. Like, he is aware that we are actively planning. We put that out in the open. One of these days, you are going to go and she will not be there when you get back. And the first place he should look is at me, because we got things in motion. I don't want to say too much in case he listens, but we got things in motion.
It's true. Yeah, we don't want to give away any of the details. Those are top secret.
Think about all the things we could do. We would travel together.
We could go to the head spa together.
Yes, you would read me smutty.
I would read them.
You would read them out loud to me. You know what I mean? I think. Try to convince me why I should give Tamlin a shot. No, nobody wants to give Tamlin a shot, right?
Nobody wants to give Tamlin a shot, no.
Except for Feyre in the first
The
book does.
The only people who like Tamlin are people who have only read the first book and have not read anything else.
It's wild to me. I can't even talk about it. But I will say, anytime ACOTAR comes up, so many people defend Rhysand and say you just haven't read the other books and what a great guy he is. And I'm like, sexual assault, people. Sexual assault. He lost me at Fairy Wine.
Yeah, you have to overlook a lot to be a fan.
Maybe that's just the state of the dating pool, Sara. Maybe you married to cousin husband up in your ivory tower can say a little bit of casual sexual assault. What's the big deal? He likes her. He loves her, you know? I don't know. I'm just saying it's hard out here in these streets as a single person being told that I should overlook sexual assault. Even for a fictional character, you know?
Anytime I am talking about that book, I preface it with the caveat that I am in a healthy marriage. I know what a healthy relationship looks like. I can read those things because I know that that's not like the reality, and I don't think anyone who doesn't understand that should not be reading those books.
I never received such warning.
Well, because you were already like pre-vetted. Like, they're like young girls reading those books, and I just don't think that that's appropriate, because what kind of realistic expectations is that setting for them, right? Like, that's just asking for somebody to get into an abusive relationship.
Sara, here's the thing. We're not here to relitigate ACOTAR. Although we could go here and do the whole thing. I am on your side. I agree with it. It is trash, but that is not the purpose of what we are talking about today. We are here in season 3, and before we get into our topic, we know that podcasting is always sweeter with a snack, and our snack of choice is hands down, obviously, always a Little Debbie. So Sara, what Little Debbie treat are we reviewing today?
Today we are talking about the cherry fruit pies. This is a sweet and tart cherry filling, a flaky pie crust, and covered with a sweet glaze, according to Little Debbie's website.
Sounds about right to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be the sister variety of the mini apple fruit pie that we reviewed in season 2. So, same type of deal, but a different flavor profile. So, I would say that I was so excited for this cherry pie. Cherry is my favorite flavor, with the exception of, I would say, I'm now a new fan of passion fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if anything is passion fruit, that's the flavor I get. I'm obsessed. If that makes me basic, I don't care. Passion fruit, anything rocks. I like lemon. I'm kind of getting more into the citrus phase of my life. But I would say, as far as a berry goes or a fruit goes, if passion fruit's not available and cherry is a flavor, that is what I want. Cherry is my flavor of choice. I love it. I love to eat cherries. And I was so pleasantly surprised by the apple pie version of this Little Debbie that I thought, oh my goodness, the cherry one is going to be off the chain. I'm going to start ordering them off Amazon. My bloodstream is going to be 40% cherry filling and Little Debbie pies. And I have to be honest with you, I was so disappointed in this one. What was good about the apple pie is that there was a good amount of filling, there was a good amount of crust, there's a little bit of glaze on top. This cherry pie filling to me was so bland. So when I say that I like cherries like homemade cherries. Cherry pie filling doesn't do much for me. That's like what was in the center of this cherry pie. But I would not say that the apple variety version was a canned apple pie filling. So this one, unfortunately, much to my chagrin, missed the mark for me. And I actually gave I think you sent me 3. I ate one and I gave the other 2 away. I was like, it's not worth it, which is not what I was expecting. So I was definitely very bummed about that. How did you feel about it?
I agree that I like the apple one more than the cherry filling. Cherry pie filling has never been something that I have sought out. I am much more of a blackberry pie or an apple pie kind of girl. So this was already kind of lower on my list. What I do like about the mini pies in general is the ratio of filling to crust, because I think about like the larger handheld pies, I feel like a lot of times it's just so much crust and hardly any filling, and it's really imbalanced. I did like that about these small, like 2-bite pies, but I definitely think the apple was the more flavorful filling than the cherry.
I just feel like it wasn't worth the calories to me because these are higher on the calorie count. But also the fact that I was so looking forward to them. And you don't really need to give me a reason to like cherry. Like, for me to give away a cherry pie or anything cherry flavored, it miss the mark. So, yeah, I was bummed about it. But I would definitely eat the apple once again. So, again, I think when you're kind of looking at the return on calories, let's call it, it can just be a little bit challenging. So I was disappointed in this one for sure.
Yeah, so Little Debbie does have like a little recipe on their website where they recommend coating the cherry pies with the chocolate hard shell syrup. So it's like a magic shell, and then top it with like a fresh cherry. So I'm curious how that little
Well, listen, that sounds delicious, but that's because of the magic shell. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And put magic shell and a cherry on anything,
Right.
anything, and I'm gonna try it.
Right.
So don't threaten me with a good time. That sounds delicious, but I think that if you have to go to all of that to really spruce up the pie, then it's missing the mark. That would just be my perspective on it.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we also got to try some of these Little Debbie recipes at some point.
For sure. No, I mean, I was just thinking if I come back for the holidays and stuff, let's get the cherry pies and do that because that does sound delicious.
Speaking of things that I find delicious, let's talk about our topic for this week. And
Wow, what an intro. Okay, Sarah, things that you find delicious. All right. Well, Sarah, let's not keep our listeners in suspense. What are we reviewing today?
so today we are reviewing the 2010 comedy film Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I can't wait to talk about it.
I am so surprised that you refer to it as a comedy, and so I think we'll probably have to dig into that a little bit. Let's tee it up here. Sarah, why did you recommend it, and why did you think I would like to check it out?
This is a relatively new movie for me. I've watched it several times, so it's not new for the podcast, but it is only something that I've watched within the last couple of years.
I would also say, just from your general time frame of which you watch movies, which is the 90s, this was 20 years after the 90s, so it is relatively a new movie time phrase wise for you.
This is really off-brand for me.
Yes.
I thought it was a really interesting concept. I think there's a lot of really cool effects in the movie, and the cast I thought was a stellar cast of all of these rock stars from the early to mid 2000s. So I thought it would be really fun to talk about all of those people and just the crazy plot in general.
We are coming up on the 15th anniversary next year, so it's always good to revisit anytime there's a milestone that's happening like that. So for people that are unfamiliar with Scott Pilgrim, what do they need to know?
So Scott Pilgrim versus the World is a 2010, let's call it a comedy movie, and I'll explain why. Based on a graphic novel series. The graphic novels were originally released between 2004 and 2010. They were written by Brian Lee O'Malley. And what's interesting is the film follows the entire graphic novel series, but the final volume was released after the film. So there is a little bit of a difference between the ending of the film and the ending of the graphic novel series. Now, I haven't watched the newest adaptation, which Netflix did a animated adaptation in 2023. So I'm not sure if the ending in that is the same as the movie or it matches the graphic novels.
So wildly popular, started as a graphic novel, then we have had all these offshoots and adaptations of movies and then series.
And while the film has not won any awards, it was on a short list of, I believe, 7 films for the best visual effects for an Academy Award. It did not end up getting the nomination. But in 2023, it was also listed as one of the 23 best Canadian comedy films by the Globe and Mail, which is why I've been referring to it as a comedy, because it's highly regarded as a Canadian comedy film.
Sarah, this is the second Canadian comedy property that you've had us check out. So we talk about my patterns, which I think are much more in your face, right? Let's go. I mean, we don't have to get Joshua Jackson, Craig T. Nelson, sailing and regattas, all of that. You do have your own patterns as well. We start with Letterkenny, and now it's Scott Pilgrim, which does take place in Canada. So I will say you are a fan of Canadian comedy. Uncle Buck, isn't John Candy Canadian as well?
Canadian, I
so
believe.
you are a fan of Canadian comedy. So I love it. I'm just saying, as we point things out to each other, I think that you are the queen of that. Another thing I want to say while I was reading is, to your point, is that I feel like I read that this underperformed at the box office, but has really found its niche as a cult following in the 14, 15 years since it has come out. And it feels like it's starting to get some recognition, and it's due a decade later. Maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time. Let's talk a little bit about the cast, though, Sarah, because this truly, when you look now, seems to be like a who's who amalgamation of the stars of tomorrow when they were up and coming.
Right. It's such a stellar cast. And I think, to your point, this film kind of strikes me as like a Napoleon Dynamite, where it wasn't highly regarded when it came out, but over the course of several years, people have really kind of stuck with it. So I think Scott Pilgrim might kind of be in that same vein. So getting into the cast, we have Michael Cera playing the lead role of Scott Pilgrim.
I sat next to him in a sushi restaurant once in Union Square in New York City. So
that's so cool.
He actually was with a Culkin. I think it was Rory Culkin from Scream 4. I was pretty sure it was that one. But yeah, they were hanging out at a sushi place right next to us.
That's pretty cool. Well, speaking of a Culkin, we do have one in this film, and it is Kieran Culkin, who is an actor that I am like starting to follow more and more, and he is the sole reason why I went to watch Succession at this point.
And his character is probably the sole reason to, well, you will like Tom Wambsgams because you think that Matthew Macfadyen cannot be sullied in his Mr. Darcy by Tom. You just have to watch Succession at this point. Let's watch the first season and do an episode on it because we have enough reasons to do so at this point in time. What I like about Kieran Culkin is he is absolutely excellent in Succession. He's finding a lot of success since, and this was on his rise in a sense, so it was kind of cool to see that come back. And then you know what I just realized for the first time? He is the little boy in Home Alone that Macaulay Culkin has to share the bed with that pees the bed.
Yeah, Fuller.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't realize that he was Fuller, so I thought that was funny because I was like, oh yeah, he's Fuller too. So yeah, I get it. I definitely get the Kieran Culkin thing. I think that he's a good one to watch.
Some other notable leads in the movie. We have Envy Adams, played by Brie Larson, who everybody knows, I think, now from her role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
She is also an Academy Award-winning actress, so she's got heavy chops and was Abed's girlfriend for an episode in Community. That's where I know her from, but...
True.
But, yes, I was surprised to see her back on this one.
Right. We have Mary Elizabeth Winstead playing Ramona Flowers.
Don't know her then, did know her now. She was okay.
I think she was in some sort of like Civil War period drama that I watched at some point, and then she also played, I believe it was Huntress in the Birds of Prey movie, which Huntress is my favorite DC superhero, and I didn't really like her portrayal, so mixed feelings about that. Some other notable actresses, we have Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Rec.
Fantastic. Don't know if you've ever heard of her, but yes, Aubrey Plaza's in the role.
She's kind of new. We also have Anna Kendrick, who plays Scott Pilgrim's sister.
It was interesting to see her pop up. I feel like she had a moment maybe 10 years ago, and I haven't seen her too much, but this was definitely right when she was a super in-demand actress.
Right.
And she probably does a lot more than I realize. Like, I think she does the troll movies and stuff, but I'm not as tuned into that stuff.
Yeah, she had her Twilight Pitch Perfect era, and that was about it. Although I think she's either directing and starring in or producing a new film that's coming out. I keep seeing ads for it, but I don't remember what it's called. And then we also have, which we'll get into when we talk about the plot of this movie, we have this like League of Evil Exes, and we have some all-star cameos in this League of Evil Exes, including Chris Evans, Brandon Routh, or Ruth, I don't even know how to say that, Mae Whitman, Jason Schwartzman, just to name a few.
Yes, it was like the vampiric council of exes from What We Do in the Shadows. I guess I didn't realize that Brandon Routh was one of them, but now that you say that, I know exactly who it was. Chris Evans was the surprise for me because it was a young Chris Evans, and he kind of has crazy facial hair and all that. It's a pre-Captain America. He was in that movie, The Perfect Score, with Scarlett Johansson. That was an MTV movie where they cheat on the SATs and stuff. So this is kind of on the heels of that. But yeah, it was interesting to see him pop up.
Yeah, there were so many really cool appearances. I was super excited about it.
Is there anything else that we need to know, or should we kick it to break and get back and talk all things Scott Pilgrim?
I think there's so much that we need to know, but we can totally cover that while we're talking plot. So let's kick it to break and we'll pick back up when we come back. We are back, ready to talk all things Scott Pilgrim. This movie is wild and I can't wait to get into it.
And for the record, I went in completely blind to this. I did not Google it at all. I had no idea that there was existing property of it or any type of graphic novel. So it was watching it for the first time going in blind. So I'm excited to share some thoughts. But Sarah, let's kick it off. We meet Scott, who is a guitar player in the band Sex Bob-omb.
Sex Bob-omb is a nod to Mario.
Oh, I know
Mario's
the Bob-omb. Yeah.
Oh, you do?
But I didn't realize that they were tying it back to Mario. I mean, that's a pretty deep cut, Mario. Right. I just thought that they wanted to say bomb weird.
Oh, yeah, I know. It took me a while to figure it out, too. In fact, I think Cousin Husband pointed it out to me. I don't think I figured it out on my own.
I hope Bowser's not disappointed in me for not knowing that. That's one of his most dangerous tools in his artillery, but I'll make it up to him later. Anyway.
I think he'll overlook it.
I love Bowser.
We know. So Scott is a guitarist in this band along with Kim, Steven, and young Neil. Scott is 22 years old and pretty much jobless, and he is currently dating 17-year-old Knives Chow, who is still in high school.
Yeah, so again, I really was not sure anything about this here. I, of course, love the names Knives Chow. I love that actress. Okay. When I read then after that it was a graphic novel, I'm like, that makes sense. That's the name of a character that's really kind of, would come from that world.
Right.
But there is, I would say, as a first-time viewer and as somebody that doesn't know, an uncomfortable amount of references to the fact that he's a 22-year-old dating a 17-year-old. They do seem to kind of have an extended conversation. I would say maybe it felt like for the first 20 minutes of the movie about him being with a 17-year-old. So I just kind of didn't know why there was such an emphasis on that and where it was going. And it kind of ended up being nothing. I felt like that's that detail, but I don't know, unless I missed something.
I think at the end there is a moment, it's like the lesson that the character learns, like self-respect, and I think it all kind of ties into establishing this character who has like no job, no life, he's dating a 17-year-old because he can't date anyone that's close to his own age, and just kind of really creating this character who's almost unlikable.
Yes. Yeah, he's very unlikable.
So Scott also lives with his gay roommate, Wallace, played by Kieran Culkin. And I think their relationship is hilarious because he frequently kicks him out, which never actually leads to anything. They share a bed, which is weird.
Yes. So it was interesting for me because Kieran Culkin is he plays this well. He plays this in Succession too, where it's kind of crass, in your face. You pay attention whenever he's on screen in this movie, also in Succession, because you don't know what's coming out of his mouth. He's an agent of chaos, right? And I think that Kieran Culkin does that really well. I loved the running gag throughout the entire movie where as soon as Scott tells him something, he's on the phone with Anna Kendrick telling him, it's like in real time, he just finishes saying something and Anna Kendrick calls him and says, oh, I heard blah, 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 blah. So I thought that was funny. I did like their dynamic. I did.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. So Scott attends a party, and at this party he meets Ramona Flowers, who is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She is new to the Toronto area from New York, and he is just completely enamored by her immediately. He had a dream about her, and he keeps seeing her everywhere, and he is just completely obsessed with her.
This movie, to me, watching it, was kind of like a fever dream. And especially because I didn't know that it was made this way. So there is a lot of the first half hour when they're establishing all of this, all the characters, all the motivations. You get an idea that Scott dated the drummer in the band and wasn't great to her when they broke up, and kind of, you don't get a ton of information, but they start making all of these relationships kind of known. And it is like a fever dream. There's a lot of quick cuts. You enter things mid-conversation. We get into a much more anime and graphic style later in the movie, which I know that we'll talk about. But I did just want to say, I mean, as somebody, again, that was viewing it for the first time and didn't know, it's very kind of fast. Like, I didn't really know what I was watching.
It is based on a graphic novel. The plot is very manga, graphic novel, comic book-esque. So it translates, I think they translated it well for a live action film, but there are just things that are like so out there for what you think of with a live action film that it's really unique.
And I do understand why it was not successful at the box office, and I do understand why it needed 10, 15 years to find the appreciation and to find that cult following, as probably the graphic novel and the Netflix ones started coming out, that people then are revisiting the movie. I do understand that, because it is a sensory overload, and it is a very unique viewing experience that you do not get a lot. I will say that.
Right, and especially once things start progressing, it is very fast-paced as well. Kind of setting everything up, like we said, Scott is at this party, he meets Ramona Flowers, he's like completely enamored with her. He wants to break up with Knives so that he can potentially date Ramona Flowers, and he goes to great lengths to just spend time with her, and they finally start having a relationship. And he gets this like really weird email that he just kind of like reads a little bit of and then deletes. And you think it's a throwaway, but it's not. It's going to come back.
He gets this email and goes about his day. Meanwhile, I will say this, little Michael Sara, Scotty Pilgrim, is juggling two women here. We're going to talk about a lot of unrealistic things that happen in this movie. The fact that Michael Sara as Scott Pilgrim can be juggling multiple women, I think, is the most outlandish thing of all of it, personally, if I do say so myself.
I agree with you.
I will say the thing, I really liked Knives Chow. I liked her from the beginning, the 17-year-old. She is so obsessed with the band. She's the number one groupie of the band. They could do anything and she would be obsessed.
It's so true. So they are trying to get recognized. So they keep playing these events. And at an event that they're playing, they finish their performance, and this guy just randomly walks in and demands that Scott fight him. And this is where we are introduced to the idea of this league of exes. So Ramona Flowers, when she gave Scott her phone number, she put 7 X's at the bottom of the paper, meaning I have 7 X's that you're going to have to fight if you want to date me. And the email that he received was from Matthew Patel, the first of the 7 evil X's, explaining that they were going to have to fight.
So I will say this. This is where the movie completely goes off the rails. Then they get into this fight. It's a very Super Nintendo video game-esque fight. It might even pull out the pals and the whacks and the action bubbles as they're fighting. All of a sudden, Scott Pilgrim can fight, is a fighter, and Ramona says, "Oh yeah, he's one of my exes, and yeah, you need to fight and kill 7 of my exes if you want to date me." And there's no build up. It's just, and everyone's like, okay. So at this point, I am like, we're just in a different universe with different rules where everybody can fight. And everybody understands that. And nobody says, like, if that happened to me, I would say, I don't care how into you I am. No, thank you. Also, she's kind of a wet blanket, nothing burger of a character, I think, the entirety of the film. So then if you line up that I have to fight 7 of your exes for her, I thought to myself, Sara is taking me on a ride, and I just have to expect nothing and just see where it goes. And that's really what my key takeaway on this first scene was. And I thought, okay, I guess we're going to watch him fight 7 people. I guess that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean the first one really comes out of nowhere. It's so unexpected. So at the end of the fight in a very typical like arcade style game, Scott Pilgrim wins, Matthew Patel bursts into a billion coins. They collect them all up, and at this point, we get the full exposition from Ramona Flowers, like, oh, these are my 7 exes. You're gonna have to fight them. All of the backstory, all the pieces click together, and so this is the ride that we're on.
So naturally, in a world where everybody can fight and your ex-boyfriend explodes into thousands of coins and people just pick up the coins and say, okay, what's next? They decide that they are going to a movie set to watch the filming of a new movie, because I guess up in Canada you can just walk onto movie sets. And the star of the movie is Chris Evans.
His character's name is Lucas Lee.
Lucas Lee, and he was really funny. He is this meathead action star that runs around and does stunts on motorcycles and skateboards and is so cool. Lucas Lee says, oh, it's time for us to fight. Scott Pilgrim, Michael Sara thinks that it's a line of dialogue and where's the other action person coming in. And the reality is no, he's talking to Scott Pilgrim, because lo and behold, he is one of Ramona's exes.
They have another fight. This one involves a lot of skateboarding and multiple stunt doubles.
He bets him that he can't take the skateboard on the railing down a bunch of steps. And because he's a meathead and he can't be challenged, he tries it and ends up perishing. So we have Scott up 2-0.
With more coins in his pocket.
More coins in his pocket.
Exactly. So the next evil ex, this is probably my favorite part of the movie. So Scott, before he was dating Knives Chow, he was dating Envy Adams, who is the lead singer of a local band that has really taken off called The Clash at Demon Head. So they are coming back to town to do a show. She personally invites Scott and the band to the show and books it so that they will be the opening act for The Clash at Demon Head.
And it's a very tough breakup. As you're seeing this, he's just starting to see Knives. And actually, everybody, now that I'm thinking about it, kind of ties it back to him having a crisis. I guess it had been a year since Envy left him. He hasn't cut his hair in a year because he was depressed. And all of a sudden, it's almost like a midlife crisis, but it's his quarter life crisis coming through, where he's been depressed for a year. Now he's dating a 17-year-old in Knives Chow. Now he's also dating Ramona Flowers, and he gets invited to Envy's show, as you mentioned. One thing I will say, though, that is pretty interesting throughout this, and maybe this is happening here at the show, is that he invites both Ramona and Knives to the show with them. So maybe you were going to talk about that, but it's all 3 of them that are attending.
Yeah, I think for a couple of scenes throughout the movie, he's still just kind of just juggling both of these women and trying to keep them as far apart as possible and not letting them have the opportunity to have long conversations in case it comes out that he is dating both of them. So that does go on for quite a while. In this scene, I love kind of the introduction to the idea that he's going to have to fight the bassist of the Clash at Demon Head, whose name is Todd Ingram. So I think we should just play that clip because I think it's a pretty cool intro.
And then it was time for Toronto to drown in the sweet sorrow of the clash at Demonhead!
That guy on bass?
Oh, yeah?
That's Todd.
I know!
Oh, yeah?
You know?
Oh, yeah!
Oh no.
After the show is over, they go backstage to kind of hang out with the band, and Scott has to fight Todd, who is a vegan. So he has these vegan powers that is making him really difficult to beat. But Scott manages to outsmart him with a cup of coffee that he put whole milk creamer into and tricked him into drinking it.
I will say this is the one that I thought Scott had the toughest time with, even more than Chris Evans, or even more than the first guy when he didn't even realize that there was going to have to be fights that were happening. But
Right.
I really like the duo. You have Brie Larson as Envy Adams, who's just really sticking it to Scott, really trying to throw barbs at both Ramona and Chow at the same time. So I felt like the tension in this scene and the dynamics were really excellent. I think everybody in this movie really has a good time and is really working together. And I always really appreciate that. I think, we're kind of going through and checking off all the X's here, but randomly throughout the movie, you have Anna Kendrick, who is Scott's sister, that's calling him and telling him the rumor she's hearing from Kieran Culkin, who's his roommate, and what a loser he is. You have Wallace going with him to the movie set because he wants to get a glimpse of Chris Evans' character. You have Aubrey Plaza, who just is popping up as somebody that works either at a comic book store or at a cafe. And so there's a lot of this, I would say, rich secondary characters that really kind of add to the story. And I think that it's definitely an ensemble film, and you really see that in this scene in particular with Brie Larson, Brendan Ruth, Scott Pilgrim, and the two girls he's with.
Right, yeah, this is really everybody all together. So Scott does defeat Todd when the vegan police show up and take away his vegan powers for drinking milk and previously having eaten chicken. Now the clash at Demonhead is out of bassist, so that's another problem that they'll have to solve. But moving on, Scott and Ramona attend another party where they are confronted by Roxy Richter, another evil ex played by Mae Whitman.
Mae Whitman plays Michael Sara, who is George Michael Bluth in Arrested Development's forgettable girlfriend, Anne. I can't even remember her name, and he's always saying, "This is my girlfriend, Anne." And Jason Bateman always goes, "Her? Really? Her?" And she eats mayonnaise on an egg, and she calls it a man egg.
I know Mae Whitman because she's done a lot of voice acting, so that's like most of what I know her from. And I believe she's in Parenthood too.
Here's the thing. I will never watch Parenthood, nor would I ever watch Parenthood, because when that show was on, I was in high school, hate to date myself. I would walk into class on whatever the morning was after, and people would be puffied, red-eyed, distraught. And I would say, "Oh my God, did your dog just die? What is going on?" Like, "No, I just watched the last episode of Parenthood." You know who else is in Parenthood? Craig T. Nelson. Craig T. Nelson.
Yes.
We're not going to do it. I'm not going to watch Parenthood. I'm not going to do it. No. But it's interesting. And, of course, Lorelai Gilmore. Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. Anyway.
That's so interesting. Fifth graders last year did that with the ending of Young Sheldon, and I was like, there's no way you guys watched that show. And it was they were like really upset about it. And I'm like, you didn't watch it.
This is a ridiculous.
You just read about it.
Yeah, it just seems from the commercials that it is such a drastic tonal difference from The Big Bang Theory that then when you say that kids are coming in crying about the finale and I don't understand it, and I am not going to spend any time trying to figure it out. And usually when I don't understand something, even if I think I'm going to not like it, and sometimes especially if I think I'm going to hate it, I do take the time to familiarize myself with it. And like with this type of Big Bang Theory multiverse, don't care. Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it.
Not gonna do it.
Yeah, not gonna do it. So Dana Carvey.
Yes.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, random tangent, but we are back. Scott is fighting Roxy Richter, which Ramona does get a little more involved in this one. It's more of a Ramona Roxy kind of fight, and then Scott kind of finishes her off at the
Because
end.
Scott really can't fight a girl, even though she's trying to attack him. Yes.
Right. Okay, so we are about halfway through all of the evil exes, so let's cut it to break, and we will wrap up this movie when we come back. We are back. We are closing out the end of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Right before break, Scott had disposed of 4 of Ramona's evil exes, and we are setting the stage for the final showdown. So Sex Bob-omb has been invited to this battle of the bands where they are going to be competing live with another band. And they find out that the competing band, really not really a band, but like the competing DJs are the Katayanagi twins, Kyle and Ken. And they are like stellar, highly respected in the area, so they're super nervous about competing with them. And of course, they are also 2 of Ramona's evil exes. We never get the details, although they do ask, did she date both of them at the same time? Did she date them individually? The polyamorous lifestyle, you know, obviously, if you look at all of these different partners, she's very open, and I think that that's a wonderful thing, Ramona. I still don't know how Scott Pilgrim fits into the lineup, but, you know, twin DJs, yeah. I get it. I co-sign that one. Yeah, she was definitely open to testing the waters quite a bit. And we do get a little backstory, like right before he fights all of the exes, but in this one they leave out the details. So I think it's up to our imagination, which I think we're choosing to believe that it was both at the same time. Again, Scott has to defeat them. This time he does have the help of his band in winning this battle, and he is successful, of course. And at this point, Ramona Flowers she's kind of been hinting that like someone else is kind of making the call, and that she has kind of tried to escape from that, but she mentions that she's gonna head back to New York, and when she's getting in the car, the person that is driving is Gideon, who is this big record label owner that Sex Bob-omb has been trying to get noticed by. And so now it becomes much more personal that Scott says that they've been trying to get the attention of this guy to get a record deal, and now he is taking Ramona away, and this is the last ex that he is going to have to fight. He's positioned as the big boss. I think that Ramona in general just is not a very compelling character. Now, she might be in the graphic novels or in the animated series when you have a lot more room to really kind of blow out personalities and really look at motivations. But I think with Ramona here, to me, it painted the story that there is some sort of abuse in this relationship, definitely manipulation and emotional abuse. And I think how they attack it, or how they go across it, is that she has a chip in the back of her head and he can control it. Again, honestly, I do have to say, like, it does get a little bit weird in all of this, but she doesn't even seem to me to even fight. Like, it's almost like she's resigned, that it's a foregone conclusion that she was always going to end up back with him. And she just does whatever he says. And I do understand that, you know, if you're in those types of relationships, that tends to be how it goes sometimes, and it's much deeper than that. So it's not that I don't understand the commentary that they're making,
but I also just felt like I just didn't like this beat, an element of the story. It just got muddy for me. And maybe the source material would clear that up, but that didn't translate as well for me on a viewing experience.
Right. I mean, honestly, I think she's the weakest character in the movie, which is sad because she's one of the main characters. But for me, I don't know if it was casting, I don't know if it was writing, a combination of both, but I was not thrilled with Ramona Flowers as a character overall. So in this fight, as we said, it's kind of the final boss fight like in a video game. Scott begins this fight and he realizes that in order to win, he needs to admit that he's in love with Ramona, which allows him to unlock the power of love sword, which he uses to attempt to defeat Gideon, and he is unsuccessful and killed. Thankfully, though, he does have another life that he can use.
He essentially plays the level and takes a first pass at trying to beat Gideon, the boss. And to your point, he admits he loves Ramona and he gets the power of love sword, which I will say this, once you get into what the flow of this movie is, and I realized, okay, it's a video game, and I realized, again, it starts operating, especially around this point, but probably a little bit more on a second watch. I think I'd pick it up more. It does start operating like a video game level, and having the graphics, he jumps up to get something or he pulls the sword out or achievement unlocked. So I did like that and appreciate that.
Right, me too. I thought that was one of the coolest things about the way this was filmed. Now he's going to attempt to defeat Gideon again. Knives Chow does offer some help this time, and he realizes that in order to defeat him this time, hopefully for good, he needs to just kind of really own up to the garbage human that he's been. So he's been stringing Knives Chow along. He hasn't been honest with Ramona. He's mistreated Kim, the drummer that he previously dated. He's mistreated all of these people, and so he just really has to like man up and kind of own up to the mistakes that he's made and trying to fix them from here on out, which allows him to unlock the power of self-respect sword that he can use to successfully defeat Gideon. So once Scott has defeated Gideon, he now has to fight this like alternate bizarro version of himself. And so everyone else at some point had kind of all gathered there. Like Sex Bomb was there, Knives Chow was there, Ramona was there. They had all kind of gathered. And now they leave and decide this is something that Scott needs to handle on his own. And what I thought was such an interesting twist is he doesn't actually end up fighting himself. They both walk out and are like, hey, you want to go get coffee? Yeah, I'd love to catch up sometime. So instead of having to fight himself, he just needed to kind of like befriend himself. Right. So he and Ramona do end up together. They walk through this random doorway that we see for a second time. It was previously shown in one of the fever dream moments, although arguably it's all a fever dream. But they get their happily ever after, I guess.
I'm sorry, she sucks. Ramona Flowers sucks. I don't get it. Is there fanfic everywhere about them?
I have not looked, but I am happy to do that research for you.
Let's do it right now.
I mean, if there's Bob's Burgers fanfics, I'm sure that there's Scott Pilgrim's fanfics.
You and Cousin Husband love Bob's Burgers. I've
We
never
do.
seen an episode.
Maybe we could do that for next season. I think you'd like it. It's pretty
Well, if there's any way to make me watch something, it's
the
in the
pod.
service of this pod.
Yeah,
so.
we've learned that through the room. So that pretty much sums up Scott Pilgrim versus the world. Now, knowing that there are graphic novels, that there is an animated series, do you think that you would continue to watch or consume any of those things?
I will say that this was not my favorite viewing experience for the podcast that we have had to date. What I will say, though, is I completely understand why you recommended it, and I completely understand the appeal. it obviously is a very, very beloved property. And I do think, to be clear, the movie is very creative. And I think that they do an amazing job visually, stylistically. It's unlike anything that I've ever watched. So I can appreciate it from a filmmaking perspective. I can appreciate it. I probably would not continue watching it. If you had it on when we were hanging out, I mean, obviously I would watch it. It would probably serve me well to watch it again, knowing what I know going into it, because again, I do think I was at a little bit of a disadvantage, to be honest with you.
I think that's fair. I think it's one of those films that it's either for somebody or it's not for somebody. It's not, I don't think it's one that's like, well, if it's on TV, I'll watch it. It's one that I think you have to want to watch. But
I appreciate being introed into the world. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I just didn't find a lot of the characters to be super compelling.
So can you compare it to a Little Debbie?
What keeps coming to mind for me in this moment right now is the Easter marshmallow puff. I think it's a seasonal thing for sure. We were just talking, me, you, and cousin husband, that I think in October every year I'm going to tackle a new anime. It's fall. It feels like anime weather, if that means anything, but it kind of does. I don't want to be watching anime in July. And maybe it's because when I first started watching Attack on Titan, or when it ended, it was in the fall. But I think I'd have to be in the mood, and I'd have to be on one of my anime kicks, which again, I'm still working to nurture. And then I had to have the marshmallow puff a couple times, and I could appreciate its merits, but it definitely was a very specific taste profile that would not be in my cupboard regularly just because I couldn't consume it all. I can't consume anime in general at all anyway. So I think the marshmallow puff is a good one.
So I would pick the peanut butter cream pie for this one. For me, the peanut butter cream pie was one that I actively avoided when I saw it in the stores, because why would I buy something that's peanut butter when there's like Swiss rolls and fudge rounds and all of those things?
And an endless supply of brownie varieties.
Exactly. There's no need to try them. However, once I did, I realized how amazing they were, but they're still something that I don't buy often. They're an every now and then kind of treat, so when I have them, I still really enjoy them. That was this movie for me. It was something that I never had any interest in watching, and now I can't understand why. Like, this is totally within my wheelhouse, but once I was introduced to it, I really enjoyed it, and it's something that I have revisited a couple of times because I enjoy it. That is it for our episode today. Thank you for joining us. Check us out on Instagram at FoFanPod for more behind the scenes and details from this episode.
And if you have thoughts on Scott Pilgrim, enlighten me, enlighten Sarah, let us know. And we are going to put up a poll at the end of this on Spotify and on our Instagram. Are you a Ramona person or are you a Knives Chow person? And spoiler alert, we don't want the Ramona people. We don't want the... But you know, Scott Pilgrim is the Ramona person.
That's true.
So
It's true.
Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for eavesdropping on us.
If you can't get enough of the Cousin Chronicles, head over to Instagram and follow at FoFanPod for more in-depth info and behind-the-scenes details.
Or email us at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
Foreign and Familiar is a Flynn & Flynn production.
The theme is Colorful by Allerlie von Nicolai.